All right, let's get this show on the road. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live as the voice of the revolution on Revolution Radio on the freedomslips.com website. We're coming to you live through the America Free Radio studios, somewhere in an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future, and here the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. Here we go. Just waiting for the intro music to finish playing. I think we should be pretty much through it. One of these days we'll figure out how to duplex the studio and we won't have this problem. All right, let's get right into it. We have 2 hours. We have a lot of news to get through while we wait for the YouTube room to fill up. By the way, David, I forgot to thank you so much for the Top Chat donation of $5 last time we were on. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that so much. You didn't think I would forget, did you? And welcome, everyone. Oh, we got Planet X. Terry's there. Yes, thank you so much. I know people are out there, and wow, we had a heck of a show Sunday night. I can't believe how many people were listening live, and within 24 hours, I mean, the views were way up there, so I appreciate that very much. Hopefully you brought a friend with you tonight. Let's get right to it. I want to talk a little bit about space exploration right off. It's a little project called Starlink. January 6th, which was just about a month ago, SpaceX Falcon 9 lifted off from Cape Canaveral, and an hour later, it opened up and delivered a payload. Now, this payload was kind of unique because it wasn't a single satellite. It had 60 Starlink satellites, and those satellites joined 120 other satellites that were launched last May and November as SpaceX seeks to accelerate deployment of its initial broadband constellation. And this is not going to be a small venture. This is about 1,500 such satellites that they're putting in orbit just this year. So these reusable rockets are very important because you can keep going up and back, and you keep putting these up there. And these are important because I'll explain to you in a little bit about why it's important. But about 36 hours after deployment, those satellites were visible to any attendees of the 35th meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Honolulu. They ventured outside in the pre-dawn hours on January 8th, and despite the bright city lights, the satellites were easily visible through a hole in the clouds, dozens of bright objects speeding from west to east in a single line like a string of pearls. Now, it's not clear how many conference attendees tried to view the satellites, but later that morning, many attended a special session at the conference about the effects Starlink satellites and mega constellations in general have on their field of view. I guess they get a little bit miffed if satellites cross in front of their view of the stars. I kind of like it myself. Stars don't move much, and it's kind of neat to go, hey, what's that going across right there? And you look it up on your little app. I don't know about you, but I have on my phone, right here on the front page, I have a constellation app. It's called Star Chart. It kind of looks like this, if I can turn it right way. But when you point it up at the sky, what it does, it has the entire constellation mapped out. So I can say, oh, that's Saturn over there, and that's Venus over there, and that's Betelgeuse, and that's Sirius. And it's really cool because you can see the constellations laid out there. You can see that? I'll try to hold it still. If I tilt it up, you can see it's looking up there at various stars that are up there. Well, I like it. It doesn't show the satellites, but it does show all the constellations, and it's kind of neat when you're going outside. The only place I have found that it really doesn't work is Tibet. I was in Tibet, and I whipped it out and pulled it up, and it was all blank because all the constellations were blanked out. I guess the satellites weren't giving any information over Tibet. It's one of those communist areas that doesn't allow information to be shared. But I don't care. I like to see the satellites. But what sets Starlink apart is what we call their magnitude. Now, these aren't really big satellites. We call them CubeSats. They're little tiny things about the size of a cooler. But when they unfold, they have solar panels on them, and they have gold foil on them. And what happens is they reflect the sun's light, even though it's dark where you are. Those things are up there, a couple hundred miles, and they can still see the sun over the horizon. So the sun is reflecting off those things, and because they're low to the ground relative to stars, they're much brighter than the stars. So we call that magnitude. And when it comes to magnitude, the more negative the number, the brighter the star. So if you see something that's a magnitude minus 3.6, that's going to be very bright. If you see something that's, say, a 1.5, that's barely going to be visible with the naked eye. So, even a fifth magnitude satellite is bright enough to pose a problem for professional astronomers. And, they require long exposures on these telescopes that have digital cameras on them. The digital cameras will take 200, 300, 400 pictures per second and overlay those pictures. And each time, it's sort of like in the old days when we had the thing called film. Yeah, I know you millennials, you don't even know what film was, but film was basically polyester that was layered with chemicals, and the chemicals would respond to photons of light by becoming opaque, like to light. And then when you developed it, you put the film into developer, then it would bring out the images of black and white or color or whatever you were going to see. Well, in digital, it's a little bit different. You don't just open the lens and leave it open and let enough photons come in and make the capture. What you do is you take oversampling. You take one picture and then another and another and another, and you stack the pictures. And if you have a motor drive scope, it can stay relatively in the same spot, even though the Earth is rotating around its axis. The telescope will stay pointed at the same star. So you could take, 2,000, 3,000 images and overlay them. And what will happen is your screen will begin to fill in with all of the constellations and the nebula that you can't see with the naked eye. In fact, you probably couldn't see it with even a 6 or 8 or 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain scope. Because when you're looking into it with a naked eye, you're looking real time. The rods and cones in your eyes only pick up so much light. But when you put a digital camera in place of your eye on that ocular, on the eyepiece, then you begin to pick up much more light, and the images are really quite spectacular. And the scopes are really, really getting good now. $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 telescope, you can take amazing pictures. And what I tried to do, and I still own the domain for, is called the Global Telescope Network. And what I really wanted to do was find 6,000 or 7,000 people with really good telescopes all around the world, assign them a section of space or assign them a star to look at, and then each night collect all that information from several thousand telescopes and create one picture of the sky. Now, this would do a couple things. First of all, it would take amazing big sky pictures instead of just little teeny tiny, half-inch squares blown way up. You'd have a big sky picture. The second thing it would do is it would allow you from night to night to see points of light that are moving. And what are those points that are moving? Well, they're asteroids, they're rogue planets, they're comets that aren't near a sun and not able to light up and leave a tail behind them. You'd have much, much better optical warning for near-Earth objects than we have right now. Right now, we do not have enough telescopes looking up there in space. We have radar and stuff, but I mean, radar can't spot something the size of a Volkswagen or a city bus if it's out there too far, because you have to have the dish to be able to pick up that signal as it's coming back. So if you have all these digital cameras out there, and some of them are invisible and some of them are infrared, you get a lot of information back, and the Global Telescope Network would help us spot near-Earth objects. Well, this Starlink, what it's designed to do is to create an interface with the 5G network. This allows us to set up a communication matrix over the outside of the Earth that will take us to the next level. And of course, the astronomers are complaining about it because these little beggars are pretty bright, and it leaves streaks all over their long time elapsed photography. So astronomers have been aware that SpaceX was planning to launch the Starlink satellites. They didn't expect them to be that bright. It kind of caught everybody off guard. And so now the AAS, the Astronomical Society, they're a little miffed. But you know what? I don't think SpaceX cares. They were a little surprised. We certainly knew this was a novel spacecraft design and a novel architecture, but the level of brightness and visibility was a surprise to us. The satellites are the product of a highly iterative design process. That means each time they build them, they get better and better and better. They learn things each time they make a set. And the volume of these that can be launched allows them to learn that much more. And hopefully these things get up and get in place and create a good solution. Now that SpaceX believes it understands what makes the Starlink satellites so bright, it is testing ways to make them less reflective, like, flat black. One of the 60 satellites on January 6th launches coated with various darkening treatments, and they'll see if those are dark enough to make the poor little astronomers happy. It might take a few months, but they'll find something that satisfies everybody and still gets the satellites to work. So SpaceX says cheer up, because the worst is yet to come. One initial goal is to make the satellites dim enough not to be visible to the naked eye, and one of the lowest rungs to meet in this complicated mix of impacts is the naked eye visibility. I think we're confident we can reach that point, they said. Interesting story. I think even if the Starlink satellites and those from other constellations are made dark enough not to be visible with the naked eye, they could still be bright enough with direct sunlight on them to pose challenges for professional astronomers. So, you know what I would say? So, sue me. Or look in between satellite passes if you can do that. But there are many more proposed systems getting ready to be launched, each with the potential of changing the character of the night sky. Not all of them are going to be deployed, but astronomers have to assume that at least some of them are going to make it to orbit. So, and by the way, praying for failure is really not an option, guys. So don't go out there and wish for the satellites to fall out of the sky. Wow. YouTube chat room is filling up. I appreciate that. Piper's out there. Good to see you. MacGyver. Nice. Danny, welcome. Charlene Graham. That's a new name. Welcome very much. Festus is out there. All good comments. Nikki, good to see you. And don't forget, this Saturday at noon Eastern Time is the second round, first class, for the Second Chance Mentoring webinar. That is, if you sign up, which you go to brooksagnew.com, click on the webinars link, and all the information you need is right there. It's the best $47 you're going to spend on yourself. We will try to do these once a month here during the spring. As we get closer to summer, to like May, we're going to get pretty busy touring. So May, June, July, August, we're going to be touring pretty heavily. And then September, October, it'll slow down a little bit. We may pick up the series again. So there's going to be a gap. So if you want to get in on these classes, now's the time to do it. I am offering my Remembering the Future 90-minute lecture plus a class on journaling. That's a very important class for those of you that are into goal setting. And if you're not doing it right. So sign up. It's this Saturday at noon. I'll take applications, right up to 30 minutes before. And you'll get 2 signed copies of the book, which I will mail to you. And you'll get the first class webinar. And then 2 weeks later, we do the second class, no extra charge. We will do a review on the journaling and then the second part of the class. And then after that, if you want to work with me one-on-one, I'm perfectly willing to do that. I'll help you write your business plan. I'll help you put your pro forma together. Whatever it is you need to kickstart your roaring 20s, there is nothing too complicated we can't do. So just sign up. Let's see. I guess I probably could put the link up there, but I bet I don't have it. Oh, there it is, right there. All right. So there it is, brooksagnew.com. For those of you in the YouTube, you can do that. And if you've already taken it or you're not interested, you already have your 401k is beautiful. You're making $50,000 a year in interest. Wonderful. For those of you that are over 40 and you don't have a 401k to manage, I expect to see you there on Saturday because you don't have the time to set up a 401k. It's time for a windfall. You need to get things moving. So sign up and we'll take care of you. No problem. Everything will go well. All right. I want to talk a little bit about now that the impeachment show season 5 has come to an end. It doesn't look like there's going to be a season 6. So I hate to disappoint you anti-Trumpers, but that's just the way it is. You tried for 3 years. You tried everything. You did 5 seasons. Wonderful TV. You got all the news media. You spent millions and millions of dollars. And now it's coming to an end. So what happens now? A lot of people are wondering that. You heard a lot of feelings out there with all this impeachment show stuff. A lot of false accusations went out, a lot of name calling, a lot of invasion of privacy, a lot of hearsay presented as evidence. And why? Well, yeah, some of it was out of hatred, but I think now we realize a lot of it was out of self-preservation because we discovered that the Ukraine was this wonderful little cash machine, and it was working very well for a long time. And while everyone was looking at Russia or everyone was looking at China, these big hitters, the big money, the easy bad guys, nobody was really looking at Ukraine. And Ukraine was, for all intents and purposes, a really nice place to drop federal aid. It was a great place. I mean, you just write 1 or 2 checks a year, $500 million, $1 billion. It's great. And what happens is it gets to Ukraine, and then they filter it through a lot of nonprofits and a lot of shell corporations, and money goes to this hand and through this diplomat and that ambassador, and it whips around again, does a U-turn, comes in the back door. And each time it changes hands, some corrupt politician somewhere gets a cut. And it was working really, really well. I mean, people were buying houses. Every single congressperson we have is worth well over $1 million. Some of them would write books that, well, nobody read, nobody cared about. In fact, they didn't even write the books. They had ghostwriters. They just put their name on it as, hey, I wrote this book. What's it about? Well, you just have to You'll just have to read the book. No, we don't really need to do any book signings because, it's already a bestseller. It's on the New York Times seller list, and it's just people, a lot of comments. And if you go to Amazon, look, there's 4,000 or 5,000 reviews, that people have written. And I don't really think anybody pays attention to the fact that it's exactly the same 4,000 or 5,000 reviews that were for the other guy's book. Nobody cares about that. You know why? Because it's this campaign money. It's this taxpayer money that ends up buying the books. That's how it works. These companies move in and they buy 10,000, 12,000, 25,000, 50,000 books. Nobody cares who's buying the books, because what matters is that the author, well, the politician, they get to pocket the money. This is how Bernie Sanders became a millionaire, like in a few months. Somebody penned a book. They put Bernie Sanders' name on it and maybe a picture or two and a couple of quotes. And Bernie Sanders' campaign bought hundreds of thousands of copies of the book, and boom, Bernie's a millionaire. This is the Clinton school for self-enrichment. This is the way it's done. Of course, there has to be a source of money. Because they're not just going to sit around, at the impeachment show party and buy each other's books. That doesn't go very far. I mean, you buy my book, I buy your book. Who makes money? Nobody makes money. The thing is, you got to have the money come in from somewhere, right? And you don't want to do like marketing. Sure, go out and market a book. Try that, see how far you get. No, just sell the book. You don't have to market because the taxpayers are going to buy it. I mean, not directly. It's going to go through a shell corporation. It's going to go through a nonprofit. It's going to come back in. I mean, this is the way the Cummins crime gang worked in Baltimore. They just arrested the mayor. They just arrested her for doing the same thing with Healthy Holly books. $800,000 of taxpayer money. She paid herself to write a self-published book. It's the way it's done, okay? Well, take that, and multiply it by 100. And that's Ukraine. That is Ukraine. So the way to make this happen and to make strategic moves against Russia, because Ukraine is attached by this little bitty isthmus to Russia, but very close to it. Been a part of Russia since, I don't know, the mid-1700s. The way to make inroads in there is to do it the way that it's been done for the last couple hundred years, and that is you put together a big fat loan, and you loan money to the country. You get them to sign a big loan document. And they get the money and they do their little improvement. They build their railroad or their dam or their utility or their whatever it is they're going to build, their big reservoir. And the top 2% of the government gets rich off of it. And before too long, what happens is the country can no longer make its payments. And so what happens is the lender, which in this case was the EU, the one with the gold circle of stars in the blue field. Well, okay, there's now one star missing because Britain is out. But there was going to be one more star in there, and that star was going to be Ukraine. No, it wasn't going to have open borders with the EU. Not yet. No. That wasn't coming with the deal. It was just a big fat loan. So the president, who was Crimean, actually speaks Russian and everything, but he was Crimean. His name was Viktor Yanukovych. Yanukovych was about to sign these loan documents because they needed the money. They had infrastructure they wanted to develop. They've been an independent state for a while, since the mid-90s, but they didn't, go the way of Estonia or Kazakhstan or these other countries that successfully developed, their resources, and they needed money. So he was going to sign the deal. So Victor sits down and he's ready to sign the documents, and the phone rings. And who is it on the phone but Vladimir Putin? And he says, look, Victor, don't sign the documents. Don't sign those loan documents. I will give you money. I will give you the $5 billion, and I will give you cheap natural gas to keep your country warm in the winter. And Victor, he liked this idea very much, so he doesn't sign the loan documents with the EU. Well, that just isn't going to fly, because Putin, would then be the benefactor to Ukraine. And that's not what they wanted to have happen. They wanted to be able to move tanks and missiles and maybe airplanes into Ukraine so they could push back against Russia, and maybe even someday, not saying attack Russia. But this is a very aggressive move. Putin gets very upset when NATO begins to move their stuff closer and closer to his gig, which is Russia. So something had to be done. Viktor Yanukovych, he had to leave. And the way to do this was to start riots. And so the riots were begun, but they didn't happen internally on their own. What happened is John McCain and John Kerry, they go in, they assess the situation, they realize what has to happen. So they send in Victoria Nuland, and they begin to set up riots. Well, nobody's paying attention. 1 week goes by, 3 weeks go by, 5 weeks go by. National media is not even playing it. Nobody cares that Ukraine is having riots in Kiev. Nobody cares. Until Victoria Nuland goes in and says, look, here's the deal. The American press is not going to pay attention until at least 100 people die. You got to have 100 people die. So we're going to have to set that up. And so what happens is professionals go in, lead Ukrainians into killing fields where professional snipers are sitting on the roof. They kill 100 people, and lo and behold, the press begins to cover it, and the pressure is then on. Of course, in a very short amount of time, Viktor Yanukovych is driven out. He serves in exile, and the old president, pulled out of prison, who was in prison for corruption, comes out, gets things going again, and next thing you know, Poroshenko is back. Everything is good. The cash machine is running fine until they have an election. In the election, Poroshenko's out, and Zelensky comes in. And Zelensky's not a politician. Imagine that. Zelensky's actually a comedian, actually well-liked, actually very smart, actually very Trumpian. And he comes in and he decides to start cleaning up the corruption. And you already know the rest is history. But let's go back a little bit, because I think this is important for you to know. It's important for you to know. Because the National Archives is in the process of reviewing several thousand documents. You like phone calls? I got phone calls. These documents relate to meetings held between senior Obama administration and Ukrainian officials at the White House in 2016. Everybody sees what is about to happen. May 26, 2016, Trump becomes the candidate. He's beginning to pull large people to his rallies, one after the other. They don't ignore it. They can see their own polling data. They know what's going to happen. So the trove of documents was discovered after a request for documents was submitted by two top GOP senators in November of 2016. Yeah, the election is already taken place. Donald Trump is now president, but he's not sworn in yet. Two senators make the request. The documents requested by Ron Johnson, who is a Republican from Wisconsin, and Chuck Grassley, very famous name, you already know him, been very active in the Kavanaugh hearings and in subsequent high-profile meetings. He's the Republican from Iowa, where they just had the Peter Buttcrack show. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a little bit. These are significant as they directly concern meetings that senior Obama administration and Ukrainian officials had at the White House. And the documents are expected to be reviewed for classification purposes. And I think what will happen is the president will declassify these documents. And they're also going to check executive privilege by lawyers for both President Obama and President Trump to make sure that these things, if they are brought to the public, don't disclose any sources or methods or any, secret stuff. But that being said, if there are crimes in there, everything could change. The documents requested by these men are significant as they directly concern meetings that they had. Johnson, who's the chairman of the Committee of Homeland Security, and Grassley, who's the chairman of the Committee on Finance, sent the 3-page detailed request letter in November to, David S. Ferriero, the head of the National Archives. Why are the National Archives important? Well, here's why. Because when a president, his term is over, what happens is usually his national security advisor, which in this case was Susan Rice. Yeah, right, Susan Rice. Like, it was a video. Everyone knows it was a video. That's Susan Rice. What she does is she goes in immediately with big guys and they seize everything. All the filing cabinets, every video, every camera angle, every surveillance camera, everything is seized and put into the National Archives. Some of it is going to be held in the Obama Library archives for at least 5 years. Some cannot be opened for 25 years. Yeah, we're already going through that with like John F. Kennedy and, stuff like that. Gerald Ford and all that stuff, it doesn't get released for 25 years. It's like really has to be kept secret because books could be written about it. I mean, lots of world leaders could be very embarrassed. They figure 25 years is long enough. Either nobody cares or the people involved, they're dead. So that's why it was written to the head of the National Archives. The request was for records of multiple White House meetings that took place in 2016 between and among Obama administration officials, Ukrainian government representatives, and Democrat National Committee officials. Why? Because this was where the money was being washed, okay? Johnson spoke to reporters, and here's what he said. We will continue our oversight. We are going to get to the bottom of what has been happening here. Hopefully, we will be able to access the information, make it available to the American public as they really do understand what's been happening. I've been telling you for the last half hour, this is what I've been telling you, and this is what's in these documents. Do I know for a fact? No. Can I intuit? Yes. Why? Because I know what it smells like. And that's why you tune into this program, because I have a unique ability to connect these dots, and I am 99% of the time I am right. We're going to get to the bottom of this eventually. A source familiar with the ongoing Senate investigation said that the request for documents is still in the National Archive notification process. The National Archives didn't immediately respond to comment. The story is going to be updated. I'm going to keep you posted, but they did recently notify the Senator's office that the expected response to the document request will likely be in the order of several thousand responsive pages. They can't give a specific date when they're going to be completed, but the notification process, however, will involve notifying both the current and former Trump and Obama administrations. Look for lawsuits. Watch these lawsuits. I'll be watching them, and I'll keep you posted on them. Because the Obama administration is going to try to protect this. Why? Because it implicates Hillary Clinton. It implicates John Kerry. It implicates Nancy Pelosi's son, Joe Biden's son. In fact, there are 5 Bidens that are involved in this. It's crazy. The November letter requested records of multiple White House meetings that took place, and these Democrat National Committee officials. Why would the DNC be involved in this? Well, you remember the conversation, right, that President Trump had with President Zelensky. What's the first name that came up? That's right. It was CrowdStrike. Why? Why was it CrowdStrike? Because they were the ones that investigated the DNC server and reported that it was the Russians that hacked it, right? It wasn't the FBI. Nope, it wasn't the FBI. It wasn't anybody. It was us. It was CrowdStrike. Where's CrowdStrike located? That's right. CrowdStrike's located in Ukraine. It was a Ukrainian company. That's why the Democratic National Committee officials are being oversighted. That's why these documents are being requested. The White House meeting records show that Alexandra Chalupa, that's a name you heard, right, during this whole impeachment show. I think it was season 3. A Ukrainian-American operative who was consulting for the DNC during the 2016 election attended numerous meetings at the White House, including one event with President Obama. Chalupa allegedly worked to get dirt on Trump from the Ukrainians. Gee, that sounds exactly like abuse of power, doesn't it? It really does. So another important facet of the request made by Johnson and Grassley was information obtained that, let's see, it coincides with a central charter in the White House meetings. Correctamundo, it's the whistleblower. CIA Ramella. Okay? It was first revealed in January, about a month ago. A slew of internal emails exchanged in May of 2019 between State Department officials and New York Times journalist Ken Vogel. Vogel requested answers regarding the White House meetings that took place in 2016. Vogel had previously reported on former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden's ties to the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, when he worked as a journalist for Politico. According to these emails obtained by Laura Ingraham, which were disclosed on her show, the alleged whistleblower, CIA Ramella, had coordinated the White House meetings in 2016. Those are the same meetings currently being investigated by these 2 senators. On May 1st, 2019, it reveals that Vogel had reached out to the State Department and wanted information on the January 2016 meetings at the Obama White House. Those meetings, Vogel confirmed in the emails, were being held with, you got it, Ukrainian prosecutors, and more than likely were coordinated by the now alleged whistleblower, Mr. CIA Ramella. Fox News has not revealed the name of the alleged whistleblower. It's CIA Ramella. Thanks to Rand Paul, now it's read into the official senatorial record. We're going to report that State Department officials, official Elizabeth Zentos, attended a meeting at the White House on January 19, 2016, with Ukrainian prosecutors and embassy officials, as well as somebody that's redacted from the National Security Council. The subjects discussed included efforts within the United States government to support prosecutions in Ukraine and the United Kingdom of Burisma Holdings, and concerns that Hunter Biden's position with the company would complicate such efforts. Did I give the date? I did, didn't I? It was January 19th, 2016. January 19th, 2016. Couldn't have been President Trump because he wasn't even the nominee until May 26th of 2016. This took place 4 months before that. How about that? The investigation was being done in Ukraine for corruption. However, the New York Times never ran the story. Imagine that. According to the November letter sent by Johnson and Grassley, Hunter Biden was also discussed at those White House meetings. The Senate request specifically references Hunter Biden's role on the board of Burisma Holdings. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up because impeachment show season 5 is over, right? There's not going to be a season 6. However, it has stimulated a new series. It's not going to have anything to do with the impeachment of Donald Trump. No. This is the impeachment of Barack Obama. But wait, Barack Obama is not president anymore. Doesn't matter. If you're out of office, you can still be impeached. Why is that important? It's very important because a lot of the legislation, specifically executive orders and executive memoranda, can be nullified if a president has been impeached. Not only that, guess what goes away? Dun, dun, dun. The pension goes away. All the presidential protections for the... What? I have a new comment? I didn't see that. What is this? Oh, okay. It's in LinkedIn. I'm not going to LinkedIn during the program. Pay attention here. Pay attention. It's important to know because the archives, which are currently protected by presidential executive privilege, all that goes away, which means the 50 million documents that are stuck in the National Archives and in the Obama Library, they all come out. And guess who goes to jail? Everybody. Everybody goes to jail. They're no longer protected by executive privilege. You want to drain the swamp? This is the way you do it. No, it's never been done before. We've never impeached a president that's out of office, but it can and should be done. Hunter Biden was the family millstone around Joe Biden's neck. The kind of chronic problem relative that plagues many political families. George H.W. Bush had his son Neil. Jimmy Carter had his brother Billy. Still, when Joe Biden went to Ukraine, he was not trying to protect his son. Nope. He was trying to protect himself. However, we really don't know the facts. I'm intuiting this because we don't have access to the most crucial documents related to Mr. CIA Ramallah or the Obama administration meetings. Part of those facts are contained in the documents that are now going through an extensive review by both former President Obama's lawyers and the Trump White House. Oh, it's happening. It is happening. What we do know is that Mr. CIA Ramallah submitted a secondhand account report, in other words, a hearsay account report, to the Intelligence Community Inspector General of Trump's phone conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on July 25th of last year. You know that transcript inside and out by now. The report later raises serious questions. It was the whistleblower's account received by Inspector General Michael Atkinson that was the impetus leading to the entire, well, not the entire impeachment, the impeachment season 3, season 4, and season 5. Season 1 and 2 didn't have anything to do with Ukraine. It had to do with Russia. Russia. Remember Mueller and yada, yada. That was in impeachment show season 1 and 2. On Wednesday of this week, the Senate is set to vote, well, it was actually today, whether to acquit or convict Trump. We already know that he was acquitted. One newspaper had it at 52-48, and the other one had it at 53-47. This morning, when I got up, I intuited, I wrote it down, 53-47. That's what it is. 53-47. I was correct. All right, let's talk a little bit about what happened last night in the caucus. I want to cover this really quickly because you've already heard a lot of this. But suffice it to say, the way this is done is you basically have a gymnasium, and I get this from a reporter that was there. A gymnasium may have 200 people in it and 4 candidates, let's say. And so they put a candidate in each corner of the gym, and over a loudspeaker they say, okay, go stand with your friend. And so they go stand with their friend in the corners, and the middle of the floor is empty. And then what they do is they count heads. You know, it's the hokey pokey. You put your right foot in, you put your right hand up, and they count. Now, if you have everyone has more than 15% of the total, then that's the count. It's done. If you have less than 15% at any one of those stations, then the count has to be redone. Only what you do is you remove that candidate. So now there's only 3 candidates left. And the people that were with that candidate now have to go to a second choice or go home. And a lot of them went home, but some of them stayed. Well, if I can't have this guy, I'll have this guy. Or if I can't have this woman, I'll have this woman. And so that's what they did. Now, evidently, in order to make this very simple, a phone app was developed. And what they would do is they would download the app, whoever was running that particular caucus, and they would put the numbers in the app, and the app is supposed to totalize everything and report it to the central Iowa totalizing. But the problem is that the app didn't function correctly. It didn't work. Now, that's understandable. I mean, the Obama administration spent, $1.5 billion on the Obamacare website, and it didn't work? So is that surprising to you? No, not to me. But what is surprising is that the app was developed by individuals who were former staffers for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. I mean, is Hillary Clinton the only person with smart people that can develop a phone app? Oh, I know 3 people who can do a phone app. Yeah, they used to work for Hillary. No problem. They can do it. Okay. So they developed the app, but as if that's not strange enough, guess who invested in the app? Guess who's a shareholder in the app? Owns a piece of it. Little Peter Buttcrack. Little Peter Buttcrack owns part of the app. Now, the strange thing is 5 o'clock comes and goes, 7 o'clock comes and goes, 8 o'clock comes and goes. The Republicans are all done. They've reported 97% of the people voted for Trump. Everything's done, sealed, finished. Everybody's home, watching, binging on Netflix. But not the Democrats. 9 o'clock comes, 10 o'clock comes, midnight comes, the next day, we still don't know. But with 62% of the votes counted, or the caucus counted, guess who's in the lead? Little Peter Buttcrack, the guy that owns the app that's counting the votes, is the guy that's ahead. I don't think it can be fixed. You know why? Because a lot of the candidates, they're gone. They went on to New Hampshire. It's another caucus, baby. We're gone. We gotta hit the ground running over there. Iowa's, so 2020. We're moving on. You're so February. And a lot of those people went home. They're not coming back out to caucus again. They're not going to re-vote. So Iowa's out, basically. Who really gets screwed here? Oh, Bernie. I mean, Bernie's followers are mad because they were the vocal ones. They were the ones that were charging. They were the ones that were faithful and showing up to all these caucuses and making sure they had all their, Bernie paraphernalia on. Well, mostly because the little Peter butt crack paraphernalia was, you couldn't wear it in public. But I'm just saying, the point is that Bernie's getting screwed again. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, I'm a big free speech guy. I don't care one way or another what you say. I just care about you having the freedom to say it. Do I think that America's ready to give up their private property and their 401ks and turn all that over to the state? No, I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think that Bernie doesn't stand a chance. But I don't like to see anybody cheated, and that's what I think was happening. Let's take a quick break. We will come back at the top of the hour with more stuff. So don't go away. More X Squared Radio coming at you right after this. Okay? Hang out for a little bit. We'll be right back. Oh, wait a minute. No, we have 4 minutes left. I'm sorry, I misread that. 4 minutes left. So let's just keep going just a little bit here. So completing the poll in this Iowa caucus thing probably is not going to be done. It's probably going to be just a write-off. It's the first time it's ever happened, and it's kind of embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. Let's see. Anna Rao, who's the product manager for Shadow, that's the name of the company that developed the app, was the special assistant to the chief technology officer on Clinton's campaign, according to her LinkedIn profile. Krista Davis, the chief technology officer at Shadow, was a software engineer on Clinton's campaign, according to her LinkedIn profile. And let's see, Gerard Niemira was the director of product on Clinton's campaign, his LinkedIn profile says. So there you have it. Yes, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, but one rotten apple and you get it. It's like, can't you go somewhere else? I mean, can't you go to Apps R Us? Can't you go to India or something like that and develop an app and it'll work perfect, and you don't have to have 3 former Clinton workers working on the app that's going to count the votes for the DNC? I mean, seriously, people, let's get it together, right? Let's get it together. Keep the chat room going. Why don't YouTubers hang out just for a little bit? We'll take a quick break. I think it is about 45 seconds away from the break. I won't hear anything come in, so we'll just kind of roll with it a little bit. We don't duplex with Revolution Radio, which is the main network that we go through on the freedomslips.com website. Remember that they're a listener-supported network, one of the largest in the country. So make your way over to revolutionradio.com, and make a little contribution. Make it monthly. Couple dollars a month goes a long, long way to keeping an organization like this going with the lights on, and keeps our program coming to you. We don't make any money on this. We don't pay them any money either. So it works out great if you support the network and we bring the listeners in. I agree. Yes. Internet traders are a big issue. What is it? Private? Oh, yes. Eliminate private property. Yeah, we got to do away with that. I mean, come on. You can't have millionaires and billionaires. It's okay to take taxpayer money and buy your books. That's okay. But you can't make it by, being a slumlord with income producing property, or, God forbid, inherit your farm from your parents. That's just totally against everything that's moral. So we're going to do away with all that, and everything's going to be fine, because then it'll be socialist and you'll have everything that you need. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about here. You won't need anything other than a free education, because we're going to train you to be a good worker, and that will work out just fine. You'll be okay. I can just tell you, all the books say socialists love socialism. They love it. They love it. It's the people that live under socialism that sometimes have a hard time. But I'll be honest with you. If you like standing in a line with a raging fever for 3 days waiting to see a nurse practitioner, you're going to love socialism. You'll love it. It'll be great. It'll be great. If you like, sleeping in a barracks or sharing your bathroom with another family that lives upstairs, you're going to love socialism. No problem. No problem. If you like getting a free education that's all government approved curricula, you can't fail. We'll find out what you're good at, and that's where we'll move you, and you'll have a living wage at whatever the government says you're good at. You're going to love socialism. You'll just love it. But if not, then you're going to have a hard time. All right. There's the break music. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Well, maybe that's the end. Let's just test it and see. Maybe that's the end of the break music at Revolution Radio. Now we're back on live for hour number 2. Thanks for showing up. Chat room's going like crazy, trying to feed some stuff in there. That's good. All right, I covered something earlier this evening on another network about the SOTUS war, the State of the Union Address war. It's not uncommon to see Democrats pouting, at the State of the Union, right? It's kind of childish. It's upsetting. At least still have a little bit of break music coming through there from the studio. Almost there. I don't want to start speaking too soon because we don't duplex with the studio, and I don't want the people listening on Revolution Radio to have to compete with that. So we'll just wait till that clears. All right, we should be good. It is not uncommon to see Democrats pouting at the State of the Union address. They just do. They sit there on their hands. They sulk. They, shake their head. They're just not good team players. I mean, they play well on their own team, but they don't clap unless it's their stuff. And now, what has never happened, though, in any State of the Union address before is open rebellion by the rank and file and blatant disrespect by the leadership. No one watching last night missed Nancy Pelosi ripping up the original signed copy of the president's speech on global television. You didn't miss it, did you? I mean, I watched it live and I stood up and I was furious. I was like, did she just tear up the speech? And yeah, it's everywhere, all over social media, everywhere. But how many of you saw the Klan? They were all dressed in white. I mean, they didn't have their hoods on last night, but the Klan standing and chanting back at the president. Remember, they were standing and they were chanting something and they're waving their hands like that. You remember seeing that? And the president just raised his voice and spoke over them, and finally they sat down. Well, the president was talking about prescription drug prices at the time, and what they were chanting was HR 3, HR 3. And they really tried to take over the event. It was really low class, but let's get past that. HR 3 is the bill that would secure lower drug prices initially as a short-term benefit, but like everything the socialists propose, it is actually designed to accomplish something much more nefarious. The bill would drastically damage innovative companies across the country. According to the study, this policy would reduce the Part D revenues for U.S. companies by $358 billion over the next 5 years. By the way, that's a 58% reduction before interest and taxes. The Congressional Budget Office projects a similar decline, $336 billion over 5 years. Sounds good, but the bad news is that money would have been reinvested in new potentially life-saving therapies for patients with cancer, heart disease, diabetes, rare diseases, and many other conditions. In other words, pre-existing conditions. Dozens of U.S. companies would be adversely affected by robbing them of capital vital to the survival of those companies. Small companies, more importantly, emerging companies with new technologies would be wiped out, resulting in their acquisition by larger companies. Typically what happens is because these smaller companies are proposing cures, that technology is never seen again. It's buried. Why? Because the big pharmaceutical companies aren't interested in cures. They're interested in treatments. All they want to do is keep treating you and crushing anyone who says that they can treat, cure, or prevent any disease. You hear it all the time on the radio, everything. Extendivite and all these companies that advertise have to include that disclaimer. We don't treat, prevent, or cure any disease. Why do they have to say that? Because the Food and Drug Administration will sue their ass off if they don't. And that's exactly what this legislation would have done, H.R. 3. That 58% reduction in Part D revenue would reduce the number of new medicines that small and emerging companies bring to market by a devastating 88%. And that's only in the U.S. because we're the ones that innovate the drugs. What this means is that if the socialists' H.R. 3 had been in effect, which was proposed by the former Baltimore crime boss, I should say the late Baltimore crime boss, Elijah Cummings. If it had gone into effect, California's emerging companies would have produced only 3 drugs instead of the 25 that actually made it to market. Yeah, H.R. 3 would completely destroy the investment cycle. By making draconian revenue reductions, it would eviscerate cash flow from operations that would otherwise support research and development, licensing partnerships, and milestone-driven agreements. And this is a real problem, okay? It's a real problem. Companies need at least $500 million and often more than $1 billion to take a new drug through the clinical tests and ultimately receive Food and Drug Administration approval. Only about 8% of drugs that make it into clinical trials achieve that agency approval. It's tough to do. That means, if you do the math, 92% of them never make a dime. They never get to the patient. It must also be mentioned that receiving FDA approval does not guarantee that a new drug will be profitable. It might lose money. Fortunately, President Trump signed an executive order, which is called the right to try. Some of these drugs may never make it to market, but they may save someone's life. If someone's already terminal, you might say, well, what do they have to lose? Well, I got news for you. I'm here. I'm here because of one of those drugs. It wasn't commercialized yet. It was only in clinical trials. I was one of the lab rats. Stage 4 melanoma, like 0%, maybe 5% survival rate. With the drug, 95% survival rate. I'm now 5 years cancer-free because of that drug. Now it's commercialized, but I would have been long gone by the time that happened. Thank you for right to try. A cell therapy company CEO wrote that his company will need heavy investment to bring its cell therapy to market. This is really incredible stuff now, this new cell therapy that's coming out. It is able to change things on a genetic level, on a DNA level that cures people, not treats them, cures them. But the price caps being envisioned in H.R. 3 would outlaw the return on that investment. As a result, the investors would likely look to a less regulated environment, like, well, tech. That's one of the reasons why my company doesn't get funded, because I'm competing against tech for the same money. The fact that President Trump knows that this emerging biopharma companies and like this cell therapy company produce about 70% of the medicines in the U.S. research and development pipeline. Of the 59 new drugs approved nationwide in 2018, guess what? 74% of them came from small and emerging companies. 74%. H.R. 3 would wipe them out. They would no longer exist. They would all be bought by large pharma companies that could afford those kinds of losses. Life sciences innovators take these dangers quite seriously. According to the 2019 California Life Sciences Industry Report, biomedical companies in California produced more than $175 billion in revenue. They employed more than 300,000 people, and they paid $20 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. These companies are an economic engine. It improves the health and improves the quality of life. Hello? For millions of people around the world. And guess what? That's just California. The economic engine is running in many other states as well, including North Carolina. H.R. 3 would be a disaster. Yes, it would reduce some drug costs for some people. It might get some Democrats reelected in the short term. But in the long run, it would also reduce the number of new medicines being produced to help patients, especially those with current unmet medical needs such as Alzheimer's and rare diseases. In essence, we would be robbing the next generation to help ourselves, and that's not a trade-off we should be making. It's not one President Trump was willing to make. It is one that socialists dressed in white last night wanted to make, and that's why they tried to take over the meeting, and that was the war going on. There's another war that's going on, and this is between the states and the federal government. This is a two-edged sword. I kind of feel both ways about this. In some ways, the federal government could say, oh, we're going to come in and take your guns. And the states could say, no, we're going to hold the Second Amendment. Don't come in our states and take our guns. We're going to impose, immigration services, and we're going to come pick up all the people getting out of jail, and we're going to deport them. In some states, in fact, 28 cities, over 200 cities in 28 states are saying, no, we're not going to enforce federal law in our city, and so we're going to do something else. What if your state, for instance, could prosecute anyone who tries to enforce a federal requirement that a state committee regards as unconstitutional? In the early 19th century, we called this nullification. Nullification. Federal government passes a law. The state says, you know what? That law doesn't work for us. Doesn't work for us. We're not going to enforce it. Well, the state of Oklahoma is now considering a proposal that's going to do exactly that. The bill has been profiled by Mike Meharry of the 10th Amendment Center. Now, just to bring you up to date here, the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, right? 10th Amendment, it specifies any powers not delegated to the federal government in the Constitution are delegated to the states, period. And there are a bunch of them, thousands of them, that the federal government does that they're not supposed to do, according to the Constitution. So Meharry picked up on this. In today's world, that could mean everything from interstate speed limits, gun rights, of course, access to drugs, health insurance, all that stuff. National defense, the membership of Congress, and presidential elections are assigned to the federal government. The bill filed in the Oklahoma Senate would create a mechanism to review federal laws and end state cooperation with enforcement of those determined to violate the U.S. Constitution by the state. Now, Representative Nathan Dahm, he's a Republican from Broken Arrow. He filed Senate Bill 1477, the Oklahoma Sovereignty Act. Now, there are a lot of these, and a lot of them have some teeth, like the Tennessee one has some teeth, Arkansas one has teeth. The North Carolina is still working on theirs. It has passed the House, not the Senate. The reason these sovereignty acts are important is they're precursors to a resolution to hold a convention of states. A convention of states requires 34 states to hold the convention. Once the amendments to the Constitution are made, it takes 38 states to ratify any of those amendments. The Second Amendment Center noted that if the committee found a federal requirement unconstitutional, Both the House and the Senate would then vote, and any measure passed would need the governor's signature. If the governor don't sign it, it doesn't get enforced in that state. If the measure passes, the federal requirement would have no legal effect in that state, and it would not be recognized by any political subdivision of the state. No one in Oklahoma could spend money to implement it, and anyone trying to enforce it could be prosecuted. Now, the bill is based on a well-established legal principle known as the anti-commandeering doctrine. It holds that the federal government cannot force states to help implement or enforce any federal act or program. They can't send troops in to enforce that law. That's against the Constitution. That dates all the way back to 1842. There was a case of Prince versus U.S., and the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government cannot go in with troops and enforce federal law in a state. The majority opinion said, and I quote, "We held in New York that Congress cannot compel the states to enact or enforce a federal regulatory program. Today, we hold that Congress cannot circumvent that prohibition by conscripting the state's officers directly." In other words, you can't use the state police or the National Guard. The federal government may neither issue directives requiring the states to address particular problems, nor can they command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program. It matters not whether policymaking is involved, and no case-by-case weighting of the burdens or benefits is necessary. Such commands are fundamentally incompatible with our constitutional system of dual sovereignty. So the testing is already coming up. I expect, based on what was said in the State of the Union talk last night, the State of the Union address, that these 200 cities in 28 states are going to face sanctions. No, federal troops aren't going to move in there. No, the state police are not going to be commandeered by the federal government to enforce those laws. No, I don't think you'll see ICE, moving in and, staking out courthouses. But you will see federal funds cut off from those cities. That is a very effective way. The same kind of sanctions that are being used against North Korea, the same kind of sanctions that are being used against China and Russia can be used against those cities, and they will work. They will work. These cities will go bankrupt without that federal money. And look for it to be challenged, and look for the states to lose. Why? Because the federal government is not compelled to give this money to the states. That cannot be written into the Constitution. The federal government does it out of the goodness of their heart because the city asks for it and the programs look worthy. And of course, if they're not willing to enforce immigration law and they're going to harbor these criminal aliens that come out of court, they should go directly into ICE custody and they should be deported from this country. Rapists, murderers, thieves, batterers, drug dealers, they should all be deported. They should not remain in this country. We only want law-abiding citizens, people that can live according to our laws. You can demonstrate that you can live according to our laws and we can get that wall built, or we can secure the border and not allow this to happen anymore. Then we may sit down and talk about amnesty and citizenship and green cards and all that stuff. Not before. So this is the pathway that I expect that things will go. All right. I got a little bit of time. I want to talk about Corona Truth. Corona Truth. Everybody knows about the coronavirus by now. No, you probably haven't been exposed to it, but you've probably seen something on the news or seen some thing on the internet about, people falling out by the ATM or the sushi store or whatever. Yeah. I see all that. But what is the truth, really? What is the truth? I'm checking out the chat room on YouTube because maybe the truth is there. Okay. Yeah, those are good thoughts. Those are good thoughts. It's all about power. Yes, I agree with that. All right, but here's the deal. You know, the company that I'm consulting with right now, we buy all our tools from China. And I don't mean wrenches. I mean, these are big tools. These tools weigh, 5 tons or 4 tons. They're big tools that are put into presses, and we make various parts with them, metal parts, plastic parts, things like that. And we buy all the tools from China because, well, I don't like it. But corporate believes we get the tools fast, and we get them far cheaper than we would if we bought them in the United States. And when it comes to big tooling like this, it is very high quality stuff. It is. The machine work is excellent, but price is everything. I hate to say it, but it is in this respect. One of the issues we're having now is that some of these tools, they haven't arrived yet, and we're ramping up. We're getting ready to make this thing that we make, and without tools, we can't make the parts. Our suppliers here in this country cannot mount those tools in their presses and make parts for us. And that's an issue. It's a big issue because they're delayed by the coronavirus. Yes. So, when people get sick and there are quarantines in place and shipments don't move, that is what's happening. And according to the press, wow, I got to turn the volume down just a little bit here. That shouldn't be happening. Well, why? You see, 10 days ago, shortly after China first started reporting cases and deaths associated with the coronavirus epidemic, there was a UK researcher. I know I should have a glass of water, shouldn't I? And he predicted that over 250,000 Chinese would be infected by the virus by yesterday. And we haven't seen that, have we? We haven't read that in the news. We haven't heard that on TV. I mean, the official Chinese data, the number of infections, it has gone up, but it's just under 25,000, right? It ain't 250,000. And we've had roughly 500 deaths. But that's a big cry from what was predicted given the incubation rates and how close people live to one another, and the fact that everything was quarantined, everything was locked down, and they didn't really have hospitals able to take care of that many people. The point is, there's a big discrepancy, about 10-to-1 difference. Like only 10% of what we're really expecting to see are we seeing. And this is what's predicted by the epidemiologists. These people know how these diseases go. The question I have is that discrepancy really possible? Is the epidemic truly far less serious than conventional epidemiological models predict? Or is China hiding? Are they hiding the full extent of the problem? Show of hands? That's what I thought. You think the way I think. I mean, after all, it is the Wall Street Journal itself that reported late January, just a couple of weeks ago, that China was explicitly manipulating the casualty number by listing pneumonia as the cause of death instead of the coronavirus. But we know the way this virus works, that's the mechanism. What happens is the virus infects you. It mimics kind of HIV, the same virus functional groups as HIV. When the little lunar lander, this is my little R2-D2, by the way, just to... That's real enough, isn't it? When the lunar lander attaches itself to a cell, what it does is it injects the genetic material into the cell, and then the macrophage, goes away. The cell then churns and generates, divides, and boom, creates another macrophage times 100. And these little beggars go floating off into the system, and they look for other cells to infect. Now, what happens is the body responds to these little things with a histamine reaction. Histamine means that all your mucous membranes in your nose, in your throat, and your lungs, the body is programmed to pour mucus over those membranes in order to wash away the antigen, the thing that's upsetting the body. And typically what happens is the histamine reaction is worse than the illness itself. I mean, we get a little achy, we get some pains, a little fever, we raise our fever to try to kill off the virus. But that histamine reaction is horrible because we're coughing and we're sneezing and we can't breathe. And what happens is this virus stimulates a kind of mucus that's very thick. It's not, it doesn't cough up easy. It sits in the bottom of the lungs. It fills up the bottom lobes of your lungs. And it causes a condition called shortness of breath. It means you walk across the kitchen, it's like, why? Because your blood oxygen content is dropping. Normally, sitting around the house or, maybe walking around the block, it drops down to, 94%, 95%, because your lungs are really good at bringing the blood close to the oxygen that you're breathing in, and then you can dump off the CO2 and pick up the oxygen, and hemoglobin is very, very good about making that exchange. But if mucus is covering the alveoli, then you don't make the connection, and that's the shortness of breath. So what happens is your activity level drops because you don't want to get up. You can't move. You can't do activity because you can't breathe. Breathing doesn't do any good because you're not getting oxygen. So that inactivity makes it worse. And what happens is you get a layer of mucus in the bottom of your lungs. Well, pneumococci, which is the bacteria responsible for pneumonia, it lives at the bottom of these mucus levels because they're anaerobic. They don't like oxygen. They don't like to be up here in the air. They like to be buried in mucus. And they like to be buried anywhere from a ½ inch or more deep in the mucus. That's where they divide really, really well. And of course, when they divide, they're also eating up resources of your body. But all cells respirate, and they all crap. That is to say, they make waste products. And the waste product that pneumococci makes is toxic. It's poison. And what happens is the poison goes into your bloodstream. And when it goes into your bloodstream, you got organs that are set up to remove this. Your liver and your kidneys. Only what happens is this toxin's so bad that it kills your kidneys. It will eventually kill your liver, but you're going to die first because your kidneys are going to fail. Once the kidneys fail, once that filter is destroyed, the toxemia, the poison in your blood, spikes. And when it does, it will kill you in a matter of hours. Yeah, hours. We used to call it walking pneumonia, but this is much worse than that. You can't cough it up. Your lungs are burning like fire because they're inflamed because of the toxins that are pouring in through the membranes into your blood. And the pneumonia kills you. And it's very fast acting. This pneumococci can divide very, very quickly. It can spread in a matter of hours. And you can have pneumonia. That's it. If you don't get that mucus out of your lungs, or if you don't get some kind of prednisone or some kind of hormone treatment into your lungs to stop the division of the pneumococci in your lungs and to break up that mucus, you're going to die. It's not easy to fight off on your own, because even if you get a kind of pussy reaction, your T cells mobilize and off, your endocrine system cranks up and the cells go attack the pneumococci, if they can keep up with it, you still have the toxins. You still have the poisons in your blood, and your liver and your kidneys are trying to filter those out. You're not drinking enough fluids. You're not flushing these things out. Your kidneys die in a matter of hours. You're dead right after that. You're dead. And that's the mechanism. So when China is saying, oh, well, this person died of pneumonia, they didn't die of the flu. Yeah, they're only 22. Normally what we see in this country, when you get pneumonia, you get what's called adult pneumonia. Like if you're over 60 years old, you're not in great shape like me. I mean, I'm way over 60 years old, but I never get sick like that because I'm very healthy, very active. I have a great immune system, thanks to maybe some genetic modification 5 years ago. But here's the point. Most people over 60 are very susceptible to pneumonia because of inactivity and because the lungs have been hammered for over 6 decades, coughing and antigens and pollution and all that stuff. Your lungs are weakened, and so you're more prone to pneumonia. And that's what kills you. So the point I'm trying to, or the thing I'm trying to ask you about is, do you believe the Chinese reported numbers? According to the report, a couple of days ago, Tencent on its webpage, it titled this Epidemic Situation Tracker. And it showed confirmed cases of novel coronavirus, that's the virus we're talking about, in China, as standing at 154,023. That's 10 times the official figure at the time. This is Saturday, a few days ago. It listed the number of suspected cases as 79,808, and that's 4 times the official figure. And while the number of cured cases was only 269, which is, by the way, well below the official number that that day of 300, most ominously, the death toll listed, this is going to get you now, the death toll listed was 24,589. Oh, that's way higher than the 300 officially used on the same day. 24,589 dead people that, by the way, probably are still contagious. That's a city. That's a small town in this country. That's a lot of folks. This was not the first time Tencent has done this, as Taiwan Times notes. Chinese citizens have noticed that Tencent has, on at least 3 occasions, posted extremely high numbers only to quickly lower them to government-approved statistics. We would never do that. Surely not. The CDC? Oh, forget about it. This is when it gets even more bizarre, okay? Contrary to claiming that this was just, a fat finger mistyping the data, observant Chinese citizens also noticed that each time the screen with a large number appears, it shows a comparison with the previous day's data, which demonstrates a reasonable incremental increase, much like, comparisons of official numbers. So you kind of look at the rate of increase, and it's a nice flat slope, so nobody panics. And this led many in the mainland to suspect that Tencent has actually 2 sets of data: the real data and, the official process data. In short, 2 camps have emerged. One, more optimistic, speculates that a coding problem could be causing the real internal data to accidentally appear, and the other is more pessimistically inclined, believes that someone behind the scenes is trying to leak the the real numbers, as the internal data being held by Beijing may not reflect the true extent of the epidemic. The question I ask is, what is the truth and what difference does it make? I mean, does it really make any difference in the infection rate if they inflate it or deflate it? No, it doesn't. So what is it making a difference about? Well, it's making a difference about the national condition. So if China is mostly concerned about, social stability, as it should be for a nation of about 1.4 billion Chinese that could get pretty pissed off in a big hurry and they could cause big problems in a big way, it's easy to comprehend why the entire political apparatus in China would be geared to presenting numbers which seem, more credible, more reliable, less scary, in light of the barrage of videos of people dying in the streets, but not so terrifying as to cause a countrywide panic. I mean, one person falling out on a street corner isn't as scary as, 200 dead people at a train station, right? This is a big difference, right? One's a onesie and the other one is a movie, which can cause people to panic. Wuhan, which I've been to Wuhan before, very industrial place, very busy place. It's the location of the main Chinese bioweapons lab. It's also the place where the outbreak began. That's very strange to me because flu doesn't work like that. Flu breaks out in Boston, Miami, Arizona, New York, all at the same time. It's flu season, right? We run TV commercials on it. It breaks out that way. Flu doesn't happen in one city. It doesn't break out in one city and then spread. That's an artificial input. That's an artificial insertion. That is a leak. That's an outbreak that was unplanned. I don't think they bioweaponed Wuhan, not on purpose, but that's where the bioweapons lab is, and accidents do happen. Rats get out. Things get thrown away instead of incinerated. So the actual shape of this being very similar to the HIV virus, showing evidence of 3 or 4 insertions into the amino acid sequence, it indicates that it probably is not a mutation. It is probably an engineered molecule, and it probably escaped. It's a manual genesis. So we'll watch it more closely. We'll keep you posted. No, I don't actually think it'll be a problem in the United States because we have a different healthcare system altogether. We have much more readily available. We don't have to have mega hospitals to take care of this. We have clinics everywhere. And there are all kinds of ways, if you catch this early on, to get treatment to keep from building up the mucus in the lungs, because we have antihistamines here that can help with that. And we have a different societal model. We don't live 3 generations to a house, and it's very easy to quarantine these things in the United States and take care of them. All right, let's change gears a little bit. I want to talk about gold and silver. I call this the match game. I am not a financial advisor, and I don't give people financial information. But the silver-gold ratio is something that we do pay attention to. It's a ratio of value between gold and silver. Normally, well, I say normally, more common, we like to see, or we typically see 80 to 1. Gold is about 80 times the price of silver. But in the modern era, it has been between 40 and 60 to 1. It means gold has dropped in value and silver has stayed pretty much the same, which we like to think as silver being horribly underpriced compared to gold. But last summer, the ratio climbed to nearly 93-1 as gold rallied. It didn't rally really high. It didn't get back up to, over 2,000. It got up to about 1,100. But silver didn't move much. It was still in the $14, $15 range. And that makes silver a very, very good buy, in the sense that we don't expect silver to drop in price. We do expect silver to probably go up in price, but we don't know by how much, because silver is being terribly shorted. Geologists estimate that there are approximately 19 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold in the Earth's crust. And that's a ratio of approximately 11.2 ounces of silver to each ounce of gold that has ever been mined. And by the way, it's interesting to note that in Egypt, the ratio was 1-1. Yeah, 1-1. They didn't have a gold rush in Egypt, did they? In 1792, the gold-silver price ratio was fixed by law at 15-1. France mandated it at 15.5-1 in 1803. Faced with the challenges of bimetallic monetary system with fixed exchange rates and the aftermath of a worldwide financial crisis, the U.S. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1873. Following the end of other Western nations, including England, Portugal, Canada, and Germany, this act formally demonetized silver and established a gold standard for the United States. As you know, that went away in 1972. So, with silver playing a smaller role as a monetary metal, because we only have maybe silver dollars that are very old, but not new ones, the silver-gold ratio gradually spread. The modern average over the last century has been around 40-1. Since the world went to a total fiat money system, that means you can make dollars worth whatever the hell you want just by printing money, there seems to be some correlation between the silver-gold ratio and the central bank money creation. During periods of central bank money printing, which is not now, but it was heavily during the Obama administration, the gap tends to shrink. In fact, it plummeted in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis as the Fed engaged in extreme monetary policy. The Federal Reserve fooled everybody into believing low interest rates and quantitative easing were temporary and that they were emergency fixes. You can take advantage of this spread. And like I said, I'm not a financial advisor or a planner, but I'm just telling you, silver is much more volatile than gold on a percentage basis. Right now, you can buy silver for between $18 and $20 an ounce. It depends on where you buy them. You can buy 10-ounce bars for about $185 or $195 on eBay, free shipping. That's pretty good. Normally, when gold goes up, it almost always takes silver with it. Gold is up a little bit to about $1,500. Furthermore, it may well mean that silver-gold ratio will shrink again as it did in years after the 2008 crash. Historically, during a bull market, in gold, silver outperforms. If this holds true, that ratio will close. The gold-silver ratio has been one of the most reliable technical buy indicators for silver whenever the ratio climbs above 80, which is where it is right now. I normally tell people that here's what I do. Long-term cash that I'm going to hold at the house, I'm not going to put it in the bank. I'm going to put it in my cigar box. If I'm going to hold long-term cash, like over 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, I like 25% of it to be in silver. And I usually buy the silver bars, not the silver rounds like the coins. I buy 1 ounce, 5 ounce, 10 ounce bars. They stack easily. They're easy to sell. They're serialized. They're pure. They're easy to take care of. And they're worth a lot of money. And if you maintain 25% of your long-term cash storage in silver, you're going to be fine. And there's a couple scenarios that could happen. One is we have a huge influx of, say, counterfeit money into the country. It's everywhere. Dollars, $5, $20, $50, $100. $100 are hard to counterfeit. But fives and tens and ones, easy to counterfeit, and they flood the system with it. What happens is the integrity in the system in the banks says we cannot let this cash float around in the market and do business, and so we're going to call it all back in. We're going to call it all back in. So they make an announcement and they say, okay, it's Wednesday. By Friday close of business, all cash back at the bank. Well, that's going to be pretty hard on people that don't bank. That's going to be really hard on people that only deal in cash, which about 20 to 25% of our society doesn't have a checking account. They just deal in cash. They mow lawns, they paint houses, they work on cars, they cut hair and do nails, and they only work for cash. And they store their cash at their house, and when they pay their rent or their car payment or go buy groceries, they pay cash. You see them all the time. You get in line behind them at the store. You see them taking cash and putting it in envelopes and mailing it back home to Somalia or to Mexico or El Salvador or Honduras. They do it all the time, every day, every hour of every day they do it. But if the government were to say, look, cash is the currency of crime, and we need to call all this cash back into the bank and account for it. Once that's done, then they can either reissue cash, like maybe it's not green anymore, maybe it's red or yellow or, has a new picture on it, or they switch everybody over to plastic. No more cash. Now you got a problem. If you have long-term cash storage, you know what's going to happen to cash, right? It's going to be worthless. After Friday, it's going to be worthless. Silver won't be. You can still hold on to anonymous liquid currency if you have metal. That's what I'm saying. They can't call the silver in. They can't call the gold in. That's never going to happen. Cash, maybe. You can't counterfeit silver. That's why I'm saying it's a good storage metal. So if you have a safe, or in my case, a cigar box, or a hollow whatever, and you're storing cash, to use for a rainy day or for, to escape, I recommend having 25% of it in silver. You can do gold. Gold's a little harder to market, and gold will get you killed because people go just nutso over gold. But silver's affordable. Silver is affordable. For less than a couple $100, you can have a 10-ounce bar, 20 or 30 bars, and you have enough money that you could survive for a while. No, it's not that hard to turn back into money if you need money. You don't have to turn it into cash and then do business. You can do business directly in the silver. Now, I've done it lots of times. This computer that I'm operating on right now, paid for in silver. Absolutely. Whatever the spot price of silver is that day, take that to them plus a couple percent, and they may hold it for a week or two and let the price go up and make more money, or they can cash it in themselves. But silver you can buy with directly. I've done it bunches of times. It is currency. All right, let's see here. I got some technology on new skin, and you be wary of this. Okay, there's some technology out there. Some Canadian scientists came up with a handheld device that prints sheets of artificial skin directly onto the wounds of burn victims. Now, it looks good. This is something that you think, wow, this is really great. But you got to be careful of this stuff, because what we're talking about is biofabrication, and it uses, yes, it does use cells, but you got to understand where these cells come from. They're called MSCs, okay? And they're not stem cells. These are modified cells. The devices successfully deposited these skin sheets onto the wounds uniformly and safely and reliably. But the person then has to take immunosuppressants because the body can reject these cells. The cells also can cause inflammation and scarring, and which you can also, get without any kind of graft at all. But if you graft your own skin, like they cut it off of your hamstring and put it on your face, it's not going to be rejected. There may be a little scarring at first, but it's not going to be rejected, and you're not going to end up with a blastoma, which is a cancer that is unexpected, but does happen. And so the state-of-the-art summary on MSC therapy in transplantation in this issue is an important milestone in a rapidly developing field, and it marks the transition of MSC therapy from early safety trials to trials of efficacy. With the MSC therapy becoming widely recognized by clinicians and increasingly researched by patients, it is important for professionals in transplantation to make themselves familiar with the field. Of course, there's nothing stopping the ultra-rich who want to look great. They don't have a burn, but they want to replace the skin on their face, for instance, and they want to look young, well beyond their years, from having their skin ablated. Now, they go in with a laser and they will ablate the skin. They'll take off the top layers of skin and reveal the dermis, which is the living cells underneath the dead layer that's on your face. And then instead of letting your face grow back, because you're going to look like a lobster for 6 weeks, and you got to put lotion, and you got to be very careful not to get infected and all that stuff. What the ultra rich do is they use fetal stem cells. Yeah, they harvest it from aborted fetuses because these cells are primary cells, and they can mutate and they can differentiate readily. And this is what they refresh the skin with. It is not ethical. It's not the way we want to see aborted tissue used, but it is done, and not so much in the U.S. as other countries, but you can, with enough money, have this treatment. I'm not mentioning names, but there are powerful female politicians who do seem to make remarkable reverses in aging when election time comes around. We also see it in actresses that we know are over 60 years old. Some of them are over 70 years old, and yet they have the skin of a 16-year-old child. Yes, there's some Botox and things like that. Oh my gosh, did you see Pelosi's face last night? Wow. I thought she was going to chew her lips off halfway through that thing. She must have no feeling at all around her mouth, the way she contorts her face to try to deal with the stress. But I'll keep you posted about this. We like to talk about a lot of different subjects on this program. This is America Free Radio. I'm Brooks Agnew, your host. We're live every Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. I don't do YouTubes on Monday nights, but I do on Wednesdays and Sunday nights. And you can always join us right here in the chat room. And I like to read your chats as they're flying by. Sometimes you're talking about what I'm talking about, and sometimes you're not, but that's cool. You're still welcome here. Please share this with people. Get people to subscribe and turn on those notifications so when we go live, you will know about it. This is the Revolution Radio Network on the freedomslips.com website, and we're coming to you live from the America Free Radio studios, and this is X Squared Radio. My Website is brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com, and you can follow me on all social media at brooksagnew, at brooksagnew. It is good for your health. Go look for the good in people and help it to grow a little every day, and before long, you will have saved the planet. We'll see you Sunday night right here on YouTube Live, X Squared Radio. Thanks so much for being with us.